This is the Capitol Rundown.
I tried to make the case to senators that the most important thing they need to do between now and November is invest federal funds in our election.
Talking about running for governor is one thing, actually doing it is another.
The road to expanding the majority runs right through Slotkin seat here.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Sherry Jones. It was a big week for Michigan politics, both in Lansing and Washington, D.C., and that includes President Joe Biden making a stop in the Great Lakes state as part of his campaign to get reelected. The president came to Saginaw County on Thursday to speak to supporters at the home of a Saginaw City Council member. He's ramping up his campaign travel following last week's State of the Union address. In last month's Michigan Democratic primary, more than 100,000 people cast ballots for uncommitted instead of Biden, part of an effort to protest the president's handling of the Israel-Gaza war. Thursday's visit is Biden's second in 6 weeks, and his team is now establishing more than 15 field offices across Michigan, including in Saginaw.
There's this feeling that in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost Michigan because she didn't do this. So I think the Biden team is very conscious of that and wants to visit here as much as possible.
Saginaw County is the only Michigan county to have voted for the winning presidential candidate in the last 4 elections. Well, one of the Republican candidates for Michigan's open Senate seat just picked up an endorsement from former President Donald Trump. On Monday, he endorsed Mike Rogers. Posting on social media, Mr. Trump said, quote, "Mike Rogers will be a great and powerful senator for Michigan, and he has my complete and total endorsement. He knows how to win." Rogers served in the House of Representatives from 2001 to 2015 and was the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Rogers considered running for president before announcing his Senate campaign last year. He's also been critical of the current Republican nominee, the man who just endorsed him. Rogers had this to say in an interview with CBS News last year.
I think the people who are going to walk in and pull the lever are in a different place than these big national polls are about where things are. Every day, the former president's numbers go down. I think people are tired of the chaos, the acerbic nature of it. I think they're ready for a calm, steady helm where we actually make progress on issues that we have admired for 10 or 15 or 20 years and never quite can get to a conclusion. I think people are ready for somebody.
If you ran, you would certainly run your own race, it seems. But if he became the nominee, would you support him as the Republican nominee? I'm just trying to understand where you stand on Trump.
Listen, I don't believe today, as I'm sitting here, that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024. Don't believe it.
In an interview with The Rundown earlier this month, Mike Rogers was asked about his past criticism of Mr. Trump, other Republicans' criticism of him, and unity in a fractured Michigan GOP.
I think it's really important to put all of these things in perspective. Primaries are family fights. Those are family disagreements. And when those things start to gel, and they have, people set aside whatever differences we thought we had or did have to unite, because remember, we're far more alike than we are different. That's why we're in, Republicans or Democrats have their own set of issues.
Well, coming up next on the Capitol Rundown, our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic will be here to give us his take on the latest Michigan political news, including who could be making moves to replace Governor Gretchen Whitmer when her term expires. Stay with us. Welcome back. 2026 might seem a long time away, but in politics, it's not that long at all. So it's no surprise that people are already talking about who will replace Governor Gretchen Whitmer when her term is up. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic has the details.
Michigan voters will be looking for a new governor in 2026 as Governor Gretchen Whitmer cannot run for re-election. And when there is an open seat like that, well, it means lots of folks will take a hard look at trying to replace her. On the Democratic side, Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson is doing everything a potential candidate for governor could possibly do at this early read. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan remains tight-lipped about his possible bid, but reportedly he is privately telling folks he is more than just interested in the job. Which brings us to the Michigan Senate, which is beginning to look like a launching pad for governor, as there are three Democratic senators looking at it. They include Oakland County Democratic Senator Mallory McMorrill, West Michigan Senate Democratic leader Winnie Brinks. She confesses she is looking at it. And then there is Lansing Senator Sarah Anthony, getting lots of free media here talking about one of the bills that she has that cleared the Senate this week. Senator Anthony also got some additional national attention this week as one of the most prominent female political action committees, Emily's List, has nominated her for its annual Rising Star Award, describing her as, quote, a history-making powerhouse.
It's an honor, for almost 20 years now. We've just been doing the work.
It's that kind of national attention that breeds all sorts of talk in our town about her running for a higher office. It's pretty clear she does not want to talk about it and wants to remain focused on her current job. Watch how she laughs at this question. This is the sort of thing that is a launching pad for other stuff, isn't it?
I never think about what the next step is. At the end of the day, I'm just excited to be serving my hometown. 6
News, however, has 2 sources who confirm indeed she has talked about running for governor. She clearly is not one of them, at least not yet.
Well, as Tim said, the Capitol Rundown has 2 sources who confirm that Senator Sarah Anthony has talked about running for governor, but she is not one of them. And Tim sat down with the Rundown's Jorma Duran to talk about that story and much more.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to help us out. Tim, tell us more about the state legislature trying to clean up its act with some new reforms. What are they, and what is the goal?
Well, the goal is to reform government so that we know who is influencing whom, how much money is being spread around. And Michigan, the state government has only one way to go on this issue, and that's up, because we are an outlier. Massachusetts and Michigan are only 2 states out of the entire union that don't have some tough laws regarding financial disclosure and freedom of information, better known as FOIA, where we can go to the governor's office and to lawmakers and say, who's been communicating with you? Who's trying to lobby you? But what we saw this week is the Senate introduced a new FOIA package to shed some light on the governor's office and the legislature. And the Michigan House came up with its own proposal for financial disclosure and ethics legislation, such as controlling lobbyists. And we'll see how this stuff flies. They're making a step. They're making a step. Under current state law, you can be a sitting state legislator, and as soon as you leave your office, you could become a lobbyist. So people at home are saying, so? Well, when you're a legislator and you know you're going to become a lobbyist for a certain entity, you could theoretically pass legislation or help to get legislation passed that would feather your nest once you get through that revolving door and become a lobbyist. So this reform proposal says in order for that to happen, you have to wait 1 year. I would submit to the jury that if you are on the inside as a legislator and you know you're going to be a lobbyist, and you can make a bunch of money by passing a bill, you're willing to wait a year for delayed gratification to get on the other side.
Well, there's more chatter about State Senator Sarah Anthony thinking about a run for the governor. What have you heard?
Well, none of the chatter is coming from her. Let's make that very clear. We approached her yesterday on the Senate floor, and let me just put it this way: she did not want to talk about the story. But we have sources, at least 2 good sources, seasoned sources, who have told me privately that she is talking about it. Now, talking about running for governor is one thing; actually doing it is another. And in her defense, look, she's got a job right now. She's chairing the Appropriations Committee, and I don't think she wants to get sideways with their agenda of running for governor while trying to run the state budget, and it's probably a wise decision.
Tim, you're my best source. We appreciate you giving us updates.
Okay, buddy, no charge.
Tim's my best source, too. Thank you, Tim and Jorma. Well, last election cycle, the race for Michigan's 7th congressional district was the most expensive in the nation. Julia Mueller, political reporter at The Hill, will be here with us to talk about the race forming around that district for the next election. That and much more coming up next. Welcome back. Representative Elissa Slotkin is currently the Democratic frontrunner in the race to replace the retiring U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, and that leaves the 7th District House seat wide open. Well, right now, Republican Tom Barrett is making a second try for this seat. He was defeated by Slotkin back in 2022 by almost 6 percentage points. In the meantime, former state Senator Curtis Hertel is the backing of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee to go for the job. It's a race that The Hill reports is one of 9 around the country that could flip the House from red to blue or keep it under GOP control.
Both parties are gunning for control of Congress, and this all comes against the backdrop of a competitive presidential race, high-profile presidential race as well. President Biden and former President Trump just both hit the thresholds they need, the delegate thresholds, to secure their parties' respective nominations. And that sets up a likely Trump-Biden rematch in November and puts renewed spotlight on a lot of these House and Senate races. In terms of the Senate, the head of the Republican Senate campaign arm has said this is the best map in decades that they've seen in terms of GOP chances to take back control of the upper chamber, which Democrats are holding by just a narrow margin there. Looking at the battle for the House, Democrats are really looking to wrest control from Republicans who won the chamber in the midterms by a smaller margin than maybe some expected. And we're seeing a lot of key House races, particularly in New York and in California. And then, of course, here in Michigan, we've got the 7th District.
In 2022, both parties spent a lot of money on the 7th District race. In the next election, it's expected to be just as much of a battleground district that will require deep pockets to win.
Right now, it looks like Hertel had a little over $1 million cash on hand at the end of last year, start of this year. And then Barrett, in that same window, started the year with roughly $650,000. Yeah, like you said, I mean, this race, the 7th District race during the midterms was one of the most expensive in the country, tens of millions of dollars poured in. And we can probably expect, a lot of funds to swoop into this race as well as things start to heat up, because this, again, is a really critical seat for both parties. The Republicans' House campaign arm has said the road to expanding the majority runs right through Slotkin's seat here.
Thank you very much, Julia. Well, coming up next on the Rundown, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was on Capitol Hill this week. We'll tell you why she was there. The Capitol Rundown will be right back. Welcome back. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. She was testifying before the Senate Rules and Administration Committee. She talked about the future of American democracy. She and other elected officials from around the country were invited to speak at Tuesday's hearing, focused on the challenges in administrating this year's election.
We talked about two things. One, the threat of misinformation and how that can make it very difficult for our voters to know who to trust and how to cast their ballots this fall. And also the challenges that election workers are facing as a result of a lot of deception and lies and misinformation. Citizens are finding their election workers being more threatened than ever before. And so I shared stories about election workers from Oakland County to the west side of the state to Detroit who are facing more threats and harassment and other types of challenges as they administer our elections in this increasingly rancorous environment.
Secretary Benson says she had a good question and answer session with senators and told them the best way she thought they can protect voting in Michigan and the nation.
I tried to make the case to senators that the most important thing they need to do between now and November is invest federal funds in our elections. This helps us increase our security. This helps us prepare to replace voting machines when they become outdated. This helps us protect our election workers from threats and violence and put security pieces in place to protect every citizen as well. So we hope that they act. I know a lot of them there saw the importance of it. And my hope now is that they'll turn to many of their colleagues in this body and speak on our behalf about the need to step up to the plate and be a true federal partner in this year's elections.
Speaking of the Secretary of State and voting in Michigan, on Wednesday, the National Republican Party filed a lawsuit against Benson and the head of the Michigan Bureau of Elections over the state's voter rolls. Those are official lists of people who have registered to vote in Michigan. And they need to be constantly updated as new voters register and existing voters die, move away, or otherwise become ineligible to vote. The RNC lawsuit claims that Michigan has not done enough to remove people from the voter rolls and says more than 90% of Michigan counties are not in compliance with federal laws. Michigan Democratic Party Chair Lavora Barnes released a statement that same day calling the lawsuit frivolous and baseless. She claims the lawsuit is meant to create doubt about the election and that Michigan is, quote, an example for the nation on how to run free and fair elections. Coming up next in the Capitol Rundown, frustration with Israel's handling of the war in Gaza is the latest debate in Congress. We'll tell you what the leaders of both parties in the Senate have to say about changing Israeli leadership. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Senate Majority Leader on Thursday called for Israel to elect a new leader. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Raquel Martin has more.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says it's time for new leadership in Israel.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way.
Schumer is the highest-ranking Jewish official in the U.S. In a speech on the Senate floor, Schumer said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government are endangering the state of Israel by refusing to protect civilians in Gaza and by rejecting any peace plan that creates a Palestinian state,
which is pushing support for Israel worldwide to historic lows.
Schumer says Israelis should elect a new leader once the war winds down.
The Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th.
The senator's suggestion sparked immediate backlash from Republicans.
It is grotesque.
Also on the Senate floor, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said Schumer's remarks undermine Israel's democracy and threaten its alliance with the U.S.
Israel is not a colony of America whose leaders serve at the pleasure of the party in power in Washington.
Miles away at an annual retreat in West Virginia, House Republicans, including Speaker Mike Johnson, piled on.
It's just plain wrong for an American leader to play such a divisive role in Israeli politics.
I believe that he should apologize.
President Biden has aired his own frustrations over Netanyahu's leadership of the war, but the State Department distanced itself from Schumer's comments.
These are statements made by Senator Schumer, not by the Biden administration.
In Washington, Raquel Martin.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.